Okay, so now you know what happens at the buyer consultation, you know what happens at the mortgage consultation, you know what the home inspector does. So now that you've got all your ducks in a row, now it's time to actually go out and start looking at homes. So the first step is our buyer specialists perform what we call Toronto MLS computer searches daily. Maybe a quick show of hands. Who's been looking at homes online already? 100%, which is pretty normal, right? Unfortunately, there's a couple of problems with it. Number one is if a new listing is what we call broker loaded into the Toronto Real Estate Board computer at, let's say, 4 o'clock today, by about 4:45, all 27,000 of us have access to that listing. However, it isn't uploaded to the public realtor.ca site for sometimes 24 to 48 hours. Similarly, if a home sells tonight conditional on financing for, let's say, 5 banking days, that would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Thursday night before the waiver is signed, Friday morning before the board is notified, 24 to 72 hours later before the listing is pulled off the public site. So you're not looking at the newest listings, and you may be looking at listings that are already sold. So our buyer specialists spend several hours each and every day looking for those newest listings and typically emailing them off to our clients right away. So now, let's say you've been in for your consultation and you've walked out with 15 or 20 listings. We're going to suggest that you drive by those on a Saturday or Sunday and call us back on Monday with your top 10 list. Because even though you've narrowed at the consultation from, let's say, 50 to 20, there's still some eliminations that could be done. So for example, let's say a listing looks really good on paper. You drive up in front of the place and the biker gang lives next door. Cross that one off your list, right? Or maybe there's a busy street humming along behind it, or an apartment building looming over the backyard that you couldn't see in the picture, right? You may want to eliminate those out of your list. So then you call us back on Monday morning and we'll set a time to go out and see some homes. So let's say you go out and see 3 or 4 homes, or you see as many as 8 or 10 on a couple of different tours, and you find one that you really like. What happens next? So now we come to the offer presentation process, and we're back to that question, how do we know how much to offer? Well, you know what we're going to do. We're going to go back to our computers, do our research. We're going to pull off the comparable sales in that specific condominium building or on that street and neighborhood, and we're going to determine what we feel is the fair market value for that home in today's market. Now we're going to call the listing agent, and we're going to ask a couple of questions. First question is a very innocent sounding question, and that is, what's the best closing date for the seller? Now, if they say March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, right? If they say March the 17th instead of, 60 to 90 days, that tells us something, doesn't it? It tells us they probably already bought something with a March 17th closing and are probably more motivated than someone who hasn't purchased already. Next question we're going to ask is, what sort of flexibility is there in the seller's price? Now, remember, they're working for the seller, so they shouldn't be telling us anything. But at least 50% of the time they spill their guts. They tell us everything we need to know, where the seller is moving, why they're moving, if they had any other offers. Sometimes they even tell us what those offers are, right? And we love it when that happens. John, come on and tell us a story about that.
Sure. So I had a client probably a few months ago now, and you've been asking about the market, whether it's hot or not. The market is indeed very hot. So right now it's actually what's called a seller's market. So sellers actually have a lot of the power right now in negotiations because there's really so few listings out there. There's just not enough homes for the amount of buyers in the market, right? So we, of course, do what we can to get any nickel and dime, any money we can off the list price. There are some situations, however, in which actually paying list price is a deal. This is the one I'll tell you about now. So I had a client who's looking for a condo on Queens Quay. She wanted a nice lake view. Those units, of course, are pretty rare to come by. So getting a lake view on Queens Quay, they're once in a while they come up, and usually when they do, they're snatched up very quickly. Very popular unit. So we've been looking for a while. A unit came up in which I thought, wow, that seems a little bit underpriced for what it was. And certainly it was. So I called my client, we had to look at it, and she loved it. Turns out it was actually priced under what it was worth. And you're asking, why would the listing agent do that, right? So what's going on right now in the market with the way it's a seller's market instead of traditionally overlisting the property, what they're actually doing now commonly is underlisting it. So they're getting a lot of excitement. A property worth $300,000 might be actually listed at $275, $280. That gets a lot of excitement, and then they'll say, okay, we're holding off offers till, say, January 23rd. That day, everyone presents their offer. The seller's, of course, hoping there's going to be a bidding war on that property. Bidding war is going to inflate the price over what it's actually worth, right? In this one case, though, the agent, in my opinion anyway, made a mistake. He didn't actually hold off offers to a certain date. So I read my CMA. Property's actually worth $300 to $310. It was listed at $270. So I said, we have to jump on this like right now. And that night, we actually put the offer together. It was actually that day, just after we saw it. That night is when we had the irrevocable, which means they have to respond to us by a certain time that night. They had quite a few showings lined up that day because of the interest that was kind of garnered by that price. And it was a Friday, actually. So Saturday, they were also planning an open house and more showings. So it's really in their benefit to try and stall, try and see if there's more interest coming in. By putting the irrevocable that night at a low price, we're kind of forcing them to make a decision. Either they have to walk away from it, or they say, yes, we'll take the deal, right? So from our perspective, what we're trying to do is really avoid the multiple offer. It goes multiple, it's going to carry that price way over $270. We don't want that. So in this case, we actually went in at list price, knowing list price was the deal. We're not going to get any better than it. If we try and negotiate a little bit off $270, we're really risking someone else coming into it, and that's going to drive it way over up to, could be close to $300 then. So that's what we did. We went in at $270, put the pressure on the seller to say, this is our deal right here. Do you want to really walk away from that and risk not selling your property? And at the end of the day, they decided they didn't want to roll the dice, as Tom was saying earlier, with the multiple offers. So they didn't roll the dice. They ended up accepting it, and my client got a great deal from that. Okay.
Great. Thanks, John. Okay, so now you've done your research. Now it's time to get into the fray and present our offer. So we're, of course, going to negotiate the offer as your buyer agent. And we typically meet at the seller's house. So there'll be the seller, the listing agent, and ourselves. We're going to present the offer. They're going to read through it, ask a couple of questions, and then they're going to kick us out because they want to discuss their strategy in private with their own listing agent. And then anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour later, they'll call us back in, and any one of three things could happen. Number one, we love your offer, we're going to take it as is. Or number two, we hate your offer, it's way too low, it's an insult, get out. Or thirdly, and most commonly, is they're going to sign it back, meaning make some changes to the offer and give it back to us for our consideration. And oftentimes, the signbacks go back and forth once, twice, sometimes several times. Typically, it all happens within a couple of hours from, let's say, 7 o'clock time frame until 10 or 11, it's all done. And sometimes it goes for a few days. But the most commonly is it happens fairly rapidly. So I'll give you an example. We did one offer presentation at the Second Cup at the corner of Royal York and Bloor in the West End. And by the way, now we've memorized all the locations of the Starbucks, the Second Cups, the Tim Hortons, the Coffee Times all around the city. Because that's where you guys are going to be hanging out. You're going to be close by to where we're doing those offers, so the shuttle time back and forth is fairly short. Now let's say we're presenting in Suite 902 upstairs. You might even be in the lobby. Or if we're presenting in a house, you might be sitting in your car outside in the summer, pacing up and down the sidewalk nervously, or in the winter, freezing in your car with the heater on, trying to stay warm while we're doing that shuttle back and forth. So this particular one, we did the offer at the Second Cup at the corner of Royal York and Bloor in the West End. And the seller and the listing agent were in the Second Cup, and our clients were a couple of doors down in a restaurant, having dinner and madly sipping glasses of wine to remain calm through the process, right? So this particular home was listed at $319,900. We did our CMA. We felt the value was $305 to $310. Okay? In this case, there were no competing offers, so we decided to go in at $295 and test the seller. So first offer from us to them is a test to see how much we can pull them down off their price. Of course, if they're good negotiators, they're trying to do the reverse. They're going to try and negotiate to pull us up as much as we can, right? So presented the offer, did the usual thing. They read through it. They asked me to go to the other side of the coffee shop for a couple of minutes. About 20 minutes later, they called me back and they said, okay, we're going to sign it back at $308. I thought, wow, this is great, all the way down from $319,900 to $308,000 in one shot. So what a sign back means is they crossed out our $295 and they wrote in 308,000 and they initialed that change. Same thing in words, initialing that. Made a couple of other changes through the offer, initialing each one of those, and they signed the offer, and then they did that whole process 3 more times. Because typically when working face-to-face with the buyer and seller, we have 4 copies, so everybody has a copy at the end of the evening if we're successful. So now I'm back out down the street to the restaurant, sit down, present my clients with the sign back, and they said, wow, this is fantastic, we'll take it. Well, that's why we don't want you guys at the offer presentation table. You'd blow it. You'd say, okay, I'll take that, sounds good. Right? Well, we don't want that for sure. And I told them that, and they said, well, you know, we're really happy. You told us 305 to 310 was the right price. We're happy at 308. Let's go. I said, no, you don't have to do that. And they said, well, what do you suggest? And I said, well, why don't we sign it back at 300,000 and see what happens? You know, maybe that is the bottom line, but if we don't ask, we don't get. Okay, fine. So we crossed out the 308. We wrote in 300,000, initialed that, same thing in words, initialing that. Agreed to the other changes that they made in the offer, initialing each one of those. And by the way, each time a new person signs on the offer or initials on the offer, we try to change the pen color because it's easier to follow the purples and the blues and the greens and so on through the offer to make sure no one misses any initials anywhere, right? And of course, if you're successful, these are very colorful, suitable for framing at the end of the day, right? Up on your wall, right? So back down into the second cup. So I sit down with them. There's the seller, the listing agent, myself. I pass all the offers over to the listing agent, which is the right protocol. She's typically now going to kick me out while they discuss it. Instead of doing that, she turns to her, looks at the offer, turns to her client and says, well, 303 was your bottom line, wasn't it? I couldn't believe she said that, right? And then the seller pipes up. She says, oh, is it worthwhile signing back for $3,000? So I jumped right in and I said, well, $300,000 is the maximum we can afford to go to. I think you should take it. And amazingly enough, they took it. So we got a great price for the home. Now, when we're showing homes to our clients, we're trying to look at as much of the physicality as possible. So when we pull up outside the home, we look at the roof shingles. If they're flat, that's good. If they're starting to curl up, that indicates some wear. We're looking at the grading around the perimeter. If it's graded away from the foundations, that's good. If it's graded this way, that might be allowing, allowing water to infiltrate into the basement. And then we're going downstairs and we're looking at the age of the furnace, the type of wiring, the type of plumbing, looking around for any visual evidence of water infiltration. And we're following that throughout the house with that visual inspection. Now, this is not intended to change, to eliminate a home inspection, but more so to give us our negotiating position when we get to the negotiating table, right? We know whatever the condition of everything is on a fairly rough basis. Now, of course, one of the things we can't see is a flat roof. We asked about it. The seller came back and told us that it had been repaired just a few years ago and it was in fine shape. However, when the inspector came down, he said, whoever repaired that did a really bad job. It's lucky it's not leaking right now. You're going to have to replace that as soon as you take over the property. So we ended up going back to the seller and getting a $1,750 credit on closing to help with that roof repair. So that's how the offer presentation process comes together. Now, with the offer, a good faith deposit is required. The amount of that deposit will vary with the purchase price. So up to $200,000, $5,000 deposit is typical. $200,000 to $250,000 might be $7,500. $250,000 to $3,000 might be $10,000, and so on. So the higher the purchase price, the higher the deposit with the offer. Now, in some cases, we've asked our clients to bring in a certified check or bank draft with our offer, especially if we're in a competitive situation, to make us stand out a little more. But certainly, normally, we just bring a check with the offer, flash it to the seller, and then, once your offer is accepted, virtually the next day, you need to turn that into a certified check or bank draft. So you need to have those funds all organized, readily available, easily transferable from savings into checking, and so on. So very important to have that. So now we're going to prepare to satisfy the conditions in the offer. So you know what happens at the home inspection. If everything goes smoothly, terrific. You simply sign a waiver to remove that condition out of the offer. But let's say something does happen. And in fact, this is a really good reason why you don't want to use your cousin Louie to do the home inspection for you. because Cousin Louie might be a great drywaller, roofer, electrician, plumber, or carpenter, but he's probably not a good furnace expert. And we've had several times now in the past couple of years where inspectors have found hairline cracks in the heat exchangers of the furnaces. What that does, it allows carbon monoxide to circulate through the house, which could be fatal, right? So in each of those cases, we called Enbridge. They came over, verified it was cracked, shut the gas off, and red tagged it, meaning they can't turn on that furnace ever again, okay? So what do we do in those situations? Do we walk away? No. What we do is we remove our condition, but by way of an amendment. And the amendment would say, delete, this offer is conditional upon having a satisfactory inspection. Insert, seller agrees to install at his own expense a brand new furnace on or before 10 days prior to the date set for completion. Seller further agrees to provide copies of the warranty and the bill of sale and provide access during that last 10 days to examine the installation. So now we're really happy. We've got a brand new furnace. Seller's not so happy, but that's a major defect that they would have to disclose to any other buyer. And depending on the season, they might have to replace that right away anyway, right? So they may as well just deal with us and get it over with. Now, condition on financing. Well, because you've done all the work ahead of time, you've provided your proof of income, proof of down payment, you've had your credit bureau done, we're all set to go. You've done all the work right away. So you know for sure that this mortgage is going to be approved for you. So this is really a rubber stamp part of the process. We fax in a copy of the offer and a copy of the listing to George or to your lender. He'll forward it on to his central lending unit. Literally 24 to 48 hours later, we've got our unconditional commitment letter in our hands. We double check the numbers to make sure they're correct, and if so, we simply sign a waiver to remove that condition out of the offer also. Now, maybe a quick show of hands. Who's thinking of buying a condominium here? Okay, several of you? Great. So, in a condominium, if you are buying a townhouse condo, you would want to have a home inspection because you've got your own furnace, wiring, plumbing, roof, windows, and so on. However, let's say you're buying suite 902, and this was the unit. Well, actually, this is bigger than some downtown units, right? For a couple $100,000. We were joking about that at the office today, that the first house I ever bought, which was back in 1980, cost me $57,000. And I was overlooking at the ICE condominiums just downtown here. A parking space is $40,000 there. Holy smokes, right? Okay, so with that high-rise condo, the inspector is going to come in. He's going to look at the kitchen over here. He's going to look at the bathroom over here. He's going to compliment you on your great downtown entertainment district location and collect a check for $460 plus GST, right? So most people don't do an inspection on a high-rise unit. If it makes you feel comfortable, no problem doing it, but most people don't bother doing it. You'd also have your standard condition upon having financing, but you also have a third condition, and this is unique to condominiums. You'd have a condition upon having a satisfactory examination of the status certificate. So the status certificate gives us a financial snapshot of that condo corporation. So it tells us how much money is in the reserve fund, whether there's any special assessments contemplated or pending, copies of the rules and regulations, financial statements and budget, and so on. And we're going to suggest that you pass those on to your lawyer. And if everything's okay, again, you'd sign a waiver to remove that condition out of the offer as well. So now, once all the waivers are signed, now the agreement is deemed to be firm and binding, and it's at this point that you've actually bought the home. Any questions up to this point? Yes?
So hypothetically, say the furnace needs to be replaced and you put this amendment in the agreement and the seller doesn't agree and the deal doesn't happen, you get your deposit back?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, typically we wouldn't put it in writing right away. We as your buyer agent would strategize, decide what we want to do, and then I would go verbally to the listing agent and say, okay, here's the problem. We thought it was a new furnace and it's broken inside. Mm-hmm. Here's what we want. And we'll say, you know what, we're going to have to tell everybody else about this too, so you may as well just deal with us. And maybe they'll come back and say, okay, we'll pay half the cost, or whatever the case might be. And then we would make up an amendment and pass it on to them for signature. So we do all the other stuff back and forth, first of all, verbally. It saves a lot of time that way. Okay. So now it's time to start packing and organize yourself for your move. And it's typically at this time that you actually choose a lawyer. So we're going to ask you, do you have a family lawyer that you've used in the past? If not, do you have a friend who's purchased recently who would recommend their lawyer? If not, we'll suggest 2 names, have you call both of them, see who you feel most comfortable with, and then we'll fax all the documentation on to them. Now, it's something that's fairly new in Ontario. It's been around probably about 15 years or so now, although it's been in the US for well over a century, is title insurance. John, come and tell us all about it.
Okay, first off, do any of you know about title insurance at all? No? Okay, good. So basically, when you purchase your property, your lawyer is going to search title on that property to make sure there's no liens against it, making sure no one else has another interest in that property. Your lawyer's opinion, however, is really only as good as his or her research. So they can make a mistake, of course, and if they do make a mistake, title insurance will cover you for that. As well, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story regarding title insurance. It kind of elaborates on how important it can be. So imagine there's 2 neighbors, and one of the neighbors actually has a garage which is 2 feet on the other person's property. They're both aware of it, but they're pretty good friends, so it's not really an issue. Then you decide to purchase a property that has a garage. For whatever reason, you might not get along with that new neighbor, and guess what? That garage now being 2 feet on his property, that can become an issue. So what title insurance can do in this case, because you weren't aware of it beforehand when you purchased the property, they can either defend your right to keep the garage where it is, they can either pay the neighbor for the 2 feet of land that you're taking up, or in the absolute worst case scenario, they can actually move the garage physically back onto your property. So they can do a few things for you there. Very important, fraud protection kind of sounds scary. It actually is pretty scary. So there was actually a family in Richmond Hill recently that underwent this. And so imagine you've been living in your home for 3 or 4 years. One day you find out that someone's actually gone down to the registry office. They've fraudulently transferred the deed over to themselves. Then they go to the bank. They fraudulently discharge your mortgage. So now they go to a second bank and say, well, here's my deed. I own the home. Here's my, I have no mortgage for the home. I'd like to take out some money and do some renovations on the property. So they get a few $100,000 in their pocket. They're off on maybe some vacation, and you could be getting notice of non-payment from the bank for the mortgage. They could even threaten to foreclose your home, power of sale. So in this case, you're looking at a ton in legal bills to get it resolved, probably $20,000, $30,000, and that's a lot of money. So in this case, title insurance will actually cover you for that if someone does fraudulently do those things to you. As well, it eliminates several smaller nominal costs. So I started off talking about your lawyer, how they're going to do a title search on the property. So normally the Law Society of Upper Canada charges $50 in case your lawyer makes an error. So if your lawyer does make an error, whatever, that $50 covers it, but title insurance waives that nominal fee. As well, Toronto Hydro and Enbridge Gas, they each charge $50 for clearances on your property. That again is waived once you have title insurance. And also, title insurance can also eliminate the cost of a survey. So a survey is basically a piece of paper. It shows the dimensions of your lot, dimensions of your house, and where the house is on that lot. So normally your seller would actually provide that to you once you purchase their property. But you can imagine a lot of homes in Toronto being 100 years old and such, they might not actually have a survey, or it might have been lost over the years, right? So if they can't provide you with that survey, generally a new survey would actually cost between $800 and $900, quite a significant cost. But with title insurance, you don't actually need the survey, and therefore that saves you that $800 to $900 in cost, right? So what does title insurance cost to you, the buyer? Well, if you're buying a condo, it's $199. If you're buying a home, it's $299. It's a one-time fee, and you purchase it through your lawyer. So you simply, when you're speaking with your lawyer and discussing the purchase with him, you just mention that you want title insurance, and you can either purchase it on the day you get your keys, that's your closing day, or any time thereafter. Any questions on that at all?
Great.
No?
So I take it you recommend having title insurance?
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's becoming more and more popular, as Tom was mentioning. So right now in Toronto,
Buy it.
right now in Toronto, about 70%. So it's getting up there. Okay.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we strongly advise everybody to get it, even if it's a condominium that you're buying, because of the fraud situation. You know, you're leaving yourself open for a lot of risk there. Okay, so now it's time to organize the balance of your down payment and all your closing costs. We're going to cover those in a second. And typically a day or so before closing, you're going to go and visit your lawyer. You're going to take in a certified check or bank draft for the balance of your down payment plus all your closing costs. And typically the only thing that happens physically these days is the exchange of keys. So your lawyer will courier the keys from the seller's lawyer's office to his office. He'll wire transfer the funds from his trust account into the seller's lawyer's trust account. And both lawyers go online and electronically change the title over from the seller's name into your name. And at this point, you're the brand new owner of that house or condo. Any questions on that last part of the process? No? Okay. All right, so let's talk about closing costs. So in this particular example, we've got a $300,000 purchase price. We've got 95% financing, so 95% of 300 is $285,000. So the difference between those two numbers, of course, is $15,000. So we're going to call that the cash required on closing before we add on expenses. Now, with 95% financing, who remembers what the CMHC fee is? Anybody? Anybody? Perfect. You get to go home. The rest of you guys have to stay late and study. Okay, 2.75% of 285 is 78.38. And that's important because you don't want to go into your lawyer's office expecting to sign a mortgage for 285 because it's actually not, because that CMHC fee is added on there. So your mortgage document will actually say, what, $292,838. Okay? Now, closing costs. We're actually going to do this estimate for you twice. First, in the initial buyer consultation. So you'll know how much money you've got to set aside for your closing. We're also going to do it for you again once you've actually purchased the home, because now we can eliminate some of the variables and narrow that down for you very accurately. So legal fees average about $750. Disbursements on closing average about $800. Those are out-of-pocket expenses that your lawyer incurs, such as searches at the sheriff's office, utility clearances, photocopies, couriers, all the nickel and dime things that add up over the course of the transaction. Now, there are two land transfer taxes that may apply. Number one is the Province of Ontario land transfer tax, and that's been around forever. But if you're a first-time buyer, you will get the first $2,000 of land transfer tax back again. So in this particular case, at $300,000 purchase, your land transfer would be $2,975. If you're a first-time buyer, they credit you with $2,000, so the total amount out of your pocket would be $975. Now, City of Toronto land transfer tax. Well, if you're buying in Mississauga, if you're buying in Pickering, in Markham, Brampton, etc., obviously it doesn't apply. However, it would apply in the City of Toronto. However, if you're a first-time buyer buying under $400,000, there is no City of Toronto land transfer tax. If you're buying, let's say, for $450,000, you only pay land transfer tax on the amount above the $400,000. So you'd pay 1% on $50,000, which is $500. Okay, so it's not so bad. Now, title insurance $299, mortgage application fee $175. Now, PST on this CMHC insurance premium. Well, province gets you again, so they charge another 8% there, $626. Now, this will change with HST, right? So there'll be 13% on all the nickel and dime items here, including legal fees and stuff like that. Now, home insurance. Home insurance is the only cost here that is an annual cost. Everything else is a one-time cost. So for a house, it's typically around $650 per year. For a condo, it's typically $250 per year. The reason it's different is in a condominium, the maintenance fee that you pay monthly covers the structural insurance. So your condo fees, your insurance fees on for a condo cover your contents plus any upgrades that your unit might have. So we add all these together, we get to roughly $62.75. We add it to the $15,000, total $21,275. Now remember, with the $300,000 purchase, $10,000 is the common deposit. You've already paid that with the acceptance of your offer, so we plug that in here and subtract it. So you'd be taking a certified check or bank draft into your lawyer in this example for roughly $11,000. Any questions on any of those? Nope. Perfect. Okay, so our last point tonight is our Mortgage Terminator program. Now remember, we talked about ways earlier about saving on the interest that you pay on your mortgage over the lifetime of that mortgage? Well, the Mortgage Terminator program will allow you to pay any mortgage off completely, 100%, in just 10 years without you having to win the lottery to do it or go to Las Vegas, right? Okay? 2 simple, easy steps. Step 1, make sure you're making your payments accelerated bi-weekly. Remember, that shortens the amortization from 25 years down to 20.87. The second step is to increase your bi-weekly payment by 10% every single year. So if your bi-weekly was $500, 10% of that would be $50. So year 1, you pay $550 every 14 days. The beginning of year 2, you add on another $50. So whatever 10% is year 1 is constant all the way through. So year 3, $650, and so on and so on, okay? So let's say you got to, if you kept doing that process, you'd completely pay off your mortgage in 10 years and 1 month, okay? 100%. And on that $200,000 mortgage, where typically over 25 years you would have paid $240,000 in interest, you'll save yourself $140,000 of that $240,000. So it's absolutely amazing how this works. Now, let's say you got to year 5 and you said, you know what? I'm already paying an extra $250 every 14 days. I didn't get the raise I was hoping for. I didn't get the spouse I was hoping for, whatever the case might be. Okay, well, hold at that level. Okay, you won't pay it off in 10 years, but you will pay it off in 12 or 13, still saving yourself between $80,000 and $100,000. Or let's say at that time you got in a car accident, were disabled, or you lost your job. You can always roll it back to the initial $500 bi-weekly. So there's no downside to this, but tremendous, tremendous upside. Now, every bank will allow you to do this. The Royal Bank, to my knowledge, is the only one that restricts you to increasing your payment by 10% a year. Most other banks allow you to increase your payment by 15 to 20% per year. TD Canada Trust allows you to increase your payment by up to 100% every single year. So you've got some tremendous opportunity there. The reason this works so well is that every penny that you pay over and above your standard mortgage payment goes to reducing the principal. So the sooner you can start it and the larger you can make that extra payment, the faster you'll pay that mortgage down. So it's absolutely fantastic how well this works. Any questions on the Mortgage Terminator program? Nope, nope, nope. Okay, you're all going to do it, right? And you should. Okay. Could I get you to, just before we do these questions with George, could I get you to pull out your door prize forms then, please, and just fill in your comments at the bottom? And then if you can just hold them up, and John will come around and pick them up. Also, if you wanted to hand in your buyer consultation, buyer planning session form, your home watch form, Saturday tour form, or rate guarantee form, we're happy to get those from you as well. Question?
Questions, okay. Mortgage payment options. Cover those briefly, all sorts of them. More than what you'll ever need, weekly, bi-weekly, rapid, as we said, prepayment, so lots of options. If you've got the money, we'll show you how to pay off your mortgage real quick. Pay off your mortgage sooner. How much interest do you save? Well, again, as I said earlier, you only pay interest on what you owe, so the sooner you get that balance down lower, the less interest you will pay and the more money you will save.
Just a point on that. I didn't talk about, people often ask, well, what about the lump sum payment? You know, should we do that? Well,
sorry, Tom.
Thanks, George. The problem with the lump sum payment is, and every bank will allow you to do it, is gathering together that $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 in a big lump to do it, right? Most people find that hard to do because there's other expenses that tend to chip away at it. But the same result will happen with the adding on that 10% to your standard payment. And then it's automatic, right? You don't miss the extra $50 coming out of your bank account every 2 weeks. And so it's absolutely a fantastic way to do it. And by the way, George, how many people use the lump sum payments?
Our survey shows about 2 to 3% at most.
Right, because it's so hard to accumulate that lump sum together.
Correct.
Right? Okay, don't touch that.
I'm staying away from it. It's twice now. Business for self. So self-employed people, how to approve. I touched on that briefly, and we would do some coaching because there are a couple nuances in there that you have to be aware of. Down payment, qualifications, what have you. So we'll cover that in the mortgage consultation. Good time to buy. Crystal ball time.
All right. Okay, so we've got the statistics up on the board here, and of course this is 2009. You can see the big tall numbers. So 2009 was the second best year in Toronto Real Estate Board history, even though the first 4 months were pretty pitiful. We're coming out of the meltdown of 2008 there in the fall. However, having said that, the average sale price last year only rose by about 4.7%. Okay, so very moderate. CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, do a prediction every year for what they think is going to happen in the year following. And they've been fairly accurate. What they're predicting for 2010 is about a 5% increase in prices. Okay, so there's lots of activity. You have to be working with someone who really knows how to handle the current market with the potential of multiple offers and so on. And sometimes be ready that you might not get the first one that you try for, right? But we've done that so many times now, it's like second nature, right? And we've got some really good strategies to give ourselves a bit of a leg up on the offers when we go and present them as well.
All right, the mystery behind condo fees.
Okay, so I think you were talking about brand new construction in a sense. Okay, so well, there's two sides. So number one is, let's say Tridel builds a new condo. In fact, let's talk about the ICE condominiums, because I was just there looking at them this week. And the second tower is going to be ready in 2014, right? So 4 years from now. So what they do is when you buy it, they give you a prospectus that says, okay, it's going to be X cents per square foot for the condo maintenance fee. But they're basing that on what there is today, right? So who knows what's going to happen next year or the year after, the price of hydro, the price of gas or oil or whatever, right? So 4 years from now you move in. But because they've told you this when you bought it, they're committed to doing that for 12 full months, right? Now the builder is motivated to tell you the truth as much as possible, because any shortfall year one, they have to make it up, right? But many cases, year two, you see the condo fees bump up by 15 to 20% because they underset them 4 years later, or 4 years before, right? Now, with condos that are well managed these days, going from 1 year to the next, it's typically only the cost of living and so on that it will go up, so 4 to 5%. The exception will be this year with the advent of HST in July the 1st, because that will impact on every single service that a condominium corporation employs. So we're probably looking at 6% increase based just on the HST, and then the 3-4% which would normally go up. So 1 year shot at around 10% perhaps, and then back to the standard again once that's sort of washed into the system. Okay. Any other questions before I have door prize? Have you collected everybody's?
It just
Yes.
applies to the purchase of all new constructed.
Yes, brand new construction, up to I think it's $400,000. Over $400,000 it applies, right? So it doesn't apply to new construction under $400,000, although there's not very much of that. But it does not apply to resale.
Okay.
The only thing it'll apply on resale is the extra costs like lawyers' fees and stuff like that. So the nickel and dime things it will hit, but not the big one.
Do you think there's going to be a surge of activity right before July 1st?
Well, the question is, do we think there's going to be a surge of activity before July 1st? Well, absolutely. In new construction there is, if they can deliver the product by July the 1st. If they buy, let's say, a condo for that 2014, too bad, right? But I've run across a couple of builders who are madly selling some townhouses, and they're promising to deliver them by June 30th in order to save the HST for the buyer on that. And then obviously after July the 1st, you'll see a slowdown in that sort of immediate new construction, and then it'll start to pick up. Just like a couple of years ago when the City of Toronto land transfer tax came in, everybody was buying in November and December to close by the end of January because they didn't want the new Toronto tax. That lasted 4 or 5 months, and then boom, back to normal. So people just get it in their brain and it goes through. Any other questions? I want these. Okay, do we have everybody's? Yes, question.
That new tax, that's only over $450 on new home loan.
On,
That HST tax.
I think it's over 400,000.
Over $400,000 new home loan.
New homes only, not on resales. And by the way, if you're thinking new construction is what for you, there's some fun sides to it. We've brought, Sally and I have bought new our last house, because you get to choose your rooms, and you get to choose your colors and design and all that stuff. But there's some big extra expenses. For example, you've got a hydrometer hookup, water meter hookup, a gas meter hookup. You've got lot levies that could be $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 on new construction. And there's a whole bunch of nickel and dime stuff that adds up. So your closing costs could be, $7,000 to $10,000 or more extra over what they would be on a resale. So we say to people, listen, if you like the idea, oh, by the way, on a house, for example, you won't get landscaping, you won't get fencing around the backyard, any of that fun stuff. You get the basic light fixtures, no window blinds or coverings. So you got to do all those things when you move in. If you like the idea of new construction, what we suggest is you buy something that's 1 or 2 years old. All those costs are out of the equation, they're all done. Somebody else has done the landscaping, the fencing, the window blinds, the lights, etc., etc.
But don't they finish the construction after a while? Because some places they say just 5 left. So it means that they are finished, aren't they?
Well, they might have only 5. If you're talking about a condominium building or a house.
Houses.
Yeah, well, they might have only 5 lots left in the last phase, right? And then they need a buyer for those.
But the one that I see, I saw it was on Sherway, and I think the construction was long time ago. It's been a few months, at least 6 months. So is that possible that they finished it and they are?
It is possible, although it doesn't happen that often. It could be possible. And so you got to wonder, well, if they're left with that many units in a very busy market like we had last year, what's going on here? Something strange here, whether the cost is too much or the ones left have bad locations or backing onto a busy street.
Or I'm mistaken about this.
Or that, who knows? Could be anything, right?
Costs are passed on to us at the end of the day. So the hydro poles, the landscaping.
Yeah, for sure.
We all,
Yeah.
goes around.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we had the idea of buying on plan, but they said that you have to pay a lot for that.
Well, for example, if you buy on plans with a house, I mean, the typical turnaround time is about, let's say, 5 to 6 months most of the time, right? So it's fairly quick. But you'd want to see some other homes in the area for the floor plan. If you're buying on plans from a condo developer, the problem is what you see on the paper, they will never guarantee that it's going to be exactly like that. And we had some issues. We had a client think he did the perfect thing. He calculated how many floors up he needed to be to get a nice clear view. The first time he walked in the unit, there was a wall right in front of him. He miscounted by 1 floor. So he was looking at a wall and he wanted to be up higher, right? So that's the nice thing about resale. What you see is what you get. So you look at the rooms, and on paper they look kind of spacious, but when you get into the real thing and there's some corners and some angles, oh, geez, how am I going to put my furniture in here, right? But if you're buying resale, even if it's a year or 2 old, at least you see what you're going to get. You look outside, nice view. You look downstairs. If there's an empty lot there, there's going to be a condo building there sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, most likely, right, if it's downtown Toronto.
You have a good idea who your neighbors are already.
Yeah.
Big factor.
Yeah, because if you look down there and there's a historical building or a church or something like that, well, that's going to be there forever, right? So then okay, I've got a nice view. So that's the type of thing you want to look for. Okay, so going to have our door prize draws. Any last questions before? Okay, so the first door prize is a gift certificate for $10 from Starbucks. Choose winner. Okay, winner is Rachel. Thank you. I'll bring it. There you go. Okay, the next door prize is a gift certificate for $100 off your closing costs. Winner is Nadia. Switch. There you go.
That's a good thing.
Next door prize is a Starbucks gift certificate for $25. What's your name?
No, he's not.
Sandra. Starbucks.
Thank you.
Okay, next door prize this is going to be easy, the last two,
Yeah.
is a gift certificate for 50% off a batch of wine at the Wine Expert store on Queen Street in the Beaches. Winner is Peter Hinton. And the last one is here. This is yours. This is a gift certificate for $200 off your closing costs. You're the lucky last person here. Okay, one last thing before we go. We had a lady come to us after one of our workshops, and she said, you know what, I can only afford to buy a condo in the 125 to 150 range. Can you help me? And we said, absolutely. We help people in all price ranges from all across the city, from Pickering, Ajax, Whitby in the east to Mississauga, Oakville in the west, and as far north as Markham, Richmond Hill, and Brampton, and of course all through the center core of the city. So we'd really enjoy working with you in the future. There's some fear that goes along with the process, but there's also lots of excitement. We love to get the hugs at the end of the day when our clients find that home of their dreams. So thank you very much for coming out tonight, and if you enjoyed it, please recommend us to your friends. Thank you very much. Thank you.